Today we'll be writing a superhero theme using something called chromatic mediants. Chromatic mediants are kind of like little superheroes themselves. They can be used in all sorts of different ways to add interest into your harmonic progressions. And today we'll be using them to write a classic superhero theme. Let's start by breaking down what a chromatic mediant is. The word mediant means that we'll be building chords that are either a minor or major third away from our starting chord. So here we're starting with C major. We're going to be building chords a minor and major third above it and a minor and major third below it. Now, the word chromatic means that in those chords, there has to be at least one chromatic tone that's not part of our C major scale. And it sounds a little bit confusing, but I think once we start building them, it'll become more clear. So we'll start by building a chord a minor third above our C major triad. So a minor third would be C, C sharp, D, E flat. There's our minor third, C to E flat. And let's build our first chord. We'll start with an E flat minor triad and see if it meets all of the requirements of a chromatic mediant. Looking at the notes in this triad, we have an E flat, G flat, and B flat, and none of those notes are part of our C major triad or scale. So that fits the chromatic portion of our chromatic mediant, and the E flat minor chord is built a minor third away from the root of our bass chord. So that fits the mediant portion of chromatic mediants. Now, one caveat that I should mention is that some require there to be a common tone between the chord we build and our originating chord, and here we don't have that common tone. But for all practical purposes, you can consider this a chromatic mediant, and it can be very useful in your compositions. Also, by not having the requirement of a common tone, that'll give us 6 possibilities of chromatic mediant chords we can use as opposed to just 4. So I think it's a good way to go. All right, let's build our next chord. This time we'll build an E flat major chord. And here again we can see that there are 2 notes that are not part of our C major triad or scale, the E flat and B flat. So that fits the chromatic portion of chromatic mediants. And then it is a minor third away from our C major chord, so that fits the mediant portion. So that again is a chromatic mediant. This one does happen to have a common tone, the G. So now let's move up a major third from the root of our C major triad, and that would be an E natural, and build our first minor triad and see if that fits the requirements of a chromatic mediant. So there's our E minor triad, and it is built a third away from our C major triad, so that fits the mediant portion. Now let's look at the notes in this triad. We have an E natural, a G natural, and a B natural. And all of those notes are part of our C major Ionian scale and this C major triad. So though this has a mediant relationship, it is not a chromatic mediant, it is just a mediant chord. So this is not a chromatic mediant. Now let's try a major chord built on this E and see if that works. Well, yes, it does, because we have this G sharp, and that is not part of our C major scale or our C major triad. So that is a chromatic mediant. So those are our 3 chromatic mediants that are above our C major triad. Now let's look at the chromatic mediants we can build some sort of third below our C major triad. I'll start a minor third below and play an A minor triad. I'm going to play it up an octave just so it's easier to see. Okay, looking at the notes in this triad, we have an A, a C, and an E. And we can see that all of those notes are part of our C Ionian scale and part of this C major triad. So though this is a mediant chord, it is not a chromatic mediant chord. Now let's try the major triad built on that A. And yes, we can see that this chord does work as a chromatic mediant because we have this chromatic note, the C sharp, which is not part of our C Ionian scale. All right, now let's try the chords built a major third below. We'll start with A flat minor. And yes, that chord works. It has all notes that are not part of the C major scale. Now, there isn't a common tone with our C major triad, but we've decided that we're going to use these as chromatic mediant, so this is an acceptable chromatic mediant. Finally, let's enter our A flat major chord. And yes, we can see that this works. We have our A flat and E flat, our chromatic notes of our C Ionian scale, and we have this common tone, the C. Now we have all 6 chromatic mediant chords related to this C major triad, and you can do this operation starting with any major or minor triad. I know it seemed like a lot to list these out, but after a while it just becomes second nature. I'll go ahead and list all of the chord names for these chords, and I'll also list all of the chromatic mediants starting with this A minor chord. And we'll come back and take a look at how you can use these chords in your own compositions. I've listed all of the chord symbols for the chromatic mediants associated with both the C major triad and the A minor triad. One way I like to use these chords is just to rock back and forth from our starting chord, say the C major triad here, and one of its chromatic mediants. And one that I really like is this A flat minor chord. I love to go between C major and A flat minor. I'm just going to rock back and forth between those two chords and see if I can improvise something simple. So that got a lot of mileage just rocking back between that C major and A flat minor. And all of the melody I played was just chord tones, but it sounded really interesting because we are juxtaposing those two very interesting chords. All right, now let's look at another way to use chromatic mediants. In the last example, we used 2 chords, the C major chord and the A flat minor chord, and we just rocked back and forth between them. There's nothing saying that once we come back to our C major chord that we can't go to one of our other chromatic mediants. So I'm going to play that. Let's pick the E flat minor chord. I'm going to go C major, A flat minor, C major, E flat minor. And I'll play these all in root positions just so we can listen to what the chords sound like with no melody. Another way I like to use these chromatic mediant chords is to have kind of a constant flow of chromatic mediants. So let me show you what I mean. Here we started on the C major chord and went to one of its chromatic mediants. Let's pick a different one this time. We'll go to E major. And what I'm going to do is once I land on E major, I'm going to pick one of its chromatic mediants and then just make a little chain of them. So we'll start on our C major and we'll go to one of its chromatic mediants, which is E major. And now I'm going to pick a chromatic mediant of E major. So let's do C sharp major. And then let's pick a chromatic mediant of C sharp major. Now you see that's not in our list anymore because now we're on C sharp major. That has become our bass chord. So let's pick A major. And then that A major, we will pick a chromatic mediant of A major. And a chromatic mediant of A major would be C major. So back to C major. So I'm going to go from C major to its chromatic mediant E major, then from E major to one of its chromatic mediants, C sharp major, then from C sharp major to one of its chromatic mediants, A major, and then back to C major. So that's our progression. So that's a really fun way to take these chromatic mediants and just open up even more possibilities of chords. And I love the way that sounds. Let's do that for our superhero theme. Let's pick some major chords like that, some really uplifting major chords. So we'll start again with our C major. This time let's go to a major chord here. We'll go down a major third to this A flat major. And let's just keep going down to major chords. We'll go to a chromatic mediant of A flat major, which would be F major. Then we'll go from a chromatic mediant of F major, let's go to D flat major. And then we'll just go back to C. Now that wasn't a chromatic mediant, that was a half step, but that's fine. You don't have to use all chromatic mediants, you can mix and match. All right, so now it's that progression. Let's play it not in root position, but just see what it sounds like if we were to put it in some sort of inversion. So it was C, A flat, F, D flat. Yeah, that already sounds very much like a superhero theme. All right, I'm going to put those chords in and then we'll come up with a melody using those chords. I've entered all of our chords into the piano sketch for our superhero theme, and we're going to go ahead and orchestrate this. But for now, let's just work in the piano sketch as we come up with a melody. You'll see that here are our chords C, A flat, F, D flat. And then I've repeated them again, but I've increased the harmonic rhythm to just 2 beats per chord, C, A flat, F, D flat. I also have put these in inversions in the first half because I wanted to have that C pedal throughout. Even on this D flat chord, I've put the major seventh, the C, in the bass. So this C is a chord tone even here under this D flat chord, and that'll give it a little bit more tension. Here in the second half where I've increased the harmonic rhythm, I've put in a descending bass line. So all of these chords now are in root position. We have C, then I have this passing tone of a B flat down to the A flat, then a passing tone of the G down to the F, passing tone of the E flat down to the D flat, and then we move back to C. And I've added one more chord in here, one more chromatic mediant. So we go from our C chord to this E flat chromatic mediant and then back to C. Let's just listen to what all of that sounds like in the piano. Now that we've laid out our chromatic mediant chords, we have a really strong framework or structure on which to build the melody. In the past, I've written the melody first and harmonized it, or written the harmony and melody together, but here we're starting with these chords. I know that we could analyze this progression in different ways. We could say, oh, well, this is simply a borrowed chord from the parallel minor, or this is some sort of sub 5, but I'm really thinking about this in the terms of the movement of these chromatic mediants. Here we have this movement at the end up to the E flat, back to the C. Again, you could say this is some sort of borrowed chord, but I want to think about this as chromatic mediants as I build this chord progression. I really am hearing that third movement, that mediant movement. All right, let's start work on the melody, and I'm already hearing things going through my head. I've written a lot of superhero themes. One thing I find in common with them is they've got a lot of leaps of fourths and fifths and octaves, and they're usually reaching upwards. So let's look at what we can do with this melody. What I'm hearing in my head is that kind of fourth and fifth movement. So starting on the fifth of C major, going up to the C and the D. So something like, we've got these triplet figures, so I'm really hearing triplets in the melody. Something like that. And then in the next measure, we've got the A flat chord. So that's where we're going to add some interest to the melody, having a note that's outside of C major. And we're ending on the C here, so we could go to the E flat and then down to the A flat. Well, that's a little too Superman. So let's do something different there. Yeah, let's do that. I think this is just feeling too much like Superman. All right, I think that's a pretty good melody. let me put that in. Okay, let's play back these first couple measures and see how this feels. All right, I think that's not bad. I can see a few things to do to make this a little bit stronger. I'd like to hear the E in this measure so that when we hear the E flat, we get that contrast. Let's move this D up to an E. Let's hear that. Oh yeah, that's much better. And you know, this is going to be taken by the trumpets in the beginning, so I think I want to take this first G and put it up. Let's put that up to a C. I'd like to start a little bit higher here, especially on that first note. Let's hear that. Yeah, I think that's better for what I'm after. All right, now let's take this little fragment and see if we can just transpose it into the next two measures at a different pitch level. And from what I'm seeing, I think we can. I think we can just take this up a fourth, and that should work. Let's see. Paste that in there. Now let's just take that up. Let's see, get rid of this forte here. F, we got the fifth, we got the root, we got the ninth, we got the third and the root, and here we have the fifth, and then down to this sharp 11. That's kind of nice. I think this should sound really good. Let's listen to that. Yeah, that's great. So you can see how we've used our little cell here, and with this repetition of the same rhythm, we've got a really strong cohesive melody. Now we need to do something in this section, and you know, again, this is going to be taken by the trumpets, so we're already getting up pretty high. So I think I need to come back down lower here because we want to end up high. Let's say we're going to end up maybe on a high C here. So I'm just going to put a C in there. And now we just have to figure out what to do here. We've got our trumpets up pretty high, and we're aiming for this note. So they're pretty close. We're going to have to move down lower and either work our way back up, or I think a better idea would be to put something in the lower brass here to take over. So we could have the French horns and trombones take over here. And as this is moving downward, we could either move upward with that lower brass or keep it at the same pitch level. We've got this figure here, this da-da-da-da. We could use this across these measures because that's what we used as a pedal point in the beginning. So that would work here across this whole thing, that same figure and rhythm. Let's put that in for now. I think that would work well in the low brass. Let's take a listen to this from the beginning and see what this sounds like. Yes, that's going to work well. I just want to point out that this line that we just put in will be heard down an octave. Right now I have it in this octave just so it won't interfere with our piano voicings. We need something at the end of this measure to lead our trumpets back up to this note. So it looks like we have the E flat chord right here on the last beat. So I'm just going to put something here. Let's put a eighth note triplet, and I think that we'll just use chord tones. We can just go B flat, G, B flat to C, up to that C. So we might as well make this 3 beats. And, you know, one other thing we could do with this is add a little bit more variety into it. This C works across this entire little section here, but we could add another note that might work here. If we go down a fourth on these C's to a G, the G is going to work on each one of these chords, and it'll be the sharp 11 again on this D flat. And we get that kind of fourth movement. We talked about how a fourth, fifth movement work really well. Let's just do that. Let's just put these down to a G. All right, well listen one more time, and then I'm going to take this and orchestrate it into a full orchestra, and then we'll come back and listen to it. Let's just listen to this one more time. I've completed the orchestration of our piece and stayed very true to the piano sketch. I call it Superheroes because I think of Chromatic Mediants as a kind of superhero that can be used in so many different ways. Here we've used it to do this kind of classic superhero sounding theme, but you can use it to evoke danger or mystery, all sorts of different sounds you can get out of these chromatic mediants. And thinking in this way just opens up a whole new world of sound and tools for your toolkit. All right, let's play Superheroes now, and I'll see you all next time.